Hi there everyone, thanks for joining me. This is Bob Martin with the Nautilus Dry Docks streaming in landscape mode today. A lot of you wanted to see it in this format. Hopefully it works out all right. If you have any problems, hit me up through the chat and we can certainly see what we have to work with. Today, you guys have been sending in a bunch of suggestions for some topics to talk about. And that includes things like, what do we got here? Batteries, lubricants. Wanted to have a summary of the RCAB's ballast system, and talk about water drainage and bleeding air through the model. So we'll touch on all of those topics, plus whatever you guys come up with in terms of questions for me throughout the course of this conversation. I think we're going to try and keep this to around half an hour today. I got some comments that things go on a little bit long, so we're going to shoot for 30 minutes. Don't hold back on your questions if you have any, all right? So let's start out, as I usually do, showing you some of the projects that I've got going on. If you've seen my YouTube videos, you've probably seen this guy. This is an X-Craft British submarine in the beginning of World War II. This kit was originally put out by a gentleman by the name of Alan Poole out of the UK. Very, very few of them put together. I picked it up from Mike Caswell, formerly of subdriver.com. And as you can see, it's a beautiful model. Now when I got it, it was just black, so I've weathered it up. You know, made it look, you know, kind of weathered and as though it's seen some work. The story behind this, a bit of a tragedy. Unfortunately, in typical fashion, UPS delivered the submarine to me, less everything from here back. So it was broken off and completely gone. It didn't even show up in the box. So we finally ended up settling up for about half of what we thought that was worth, unfortunately. So I ended up 3D printing a new stern section for the boat, attaching it, running all of the linkages and everything. So I really like how it turned out. I got some kind of neat features in here. Got a magnetic cover that allows me to install all of my linkages in the back area. The entire center section here lifts off. I've only got one hand. I'm not even going to attempt that. The snorkel raises and lowers. It remains in place magnetically inside. All of the periscopes are removable. I put a nice tall periscope on there so that you can watch the progress from, even though the boat could be, you know, over a foot underneath the water there. I put an old D&E 3.5-inch watertight cylinder in there. So that's what I got going on right there. It turned out really well. It's been trimmed out. It's perfectly trimmed. It's up for lake trials here right away. As you can see here, I got a couple of 3D printed things. These are actually the fore and aft sections of the Mystic DSRV submersible. It's in about 1/22nd scale. It's the body is 3.5 inches in diameter. Just started on that. I got more parts on the printer here right now, so look for some information on that coming up here in the very short term. Top secret project. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but I'm pretty stoked about it. As you can see, it's fairly sizable, and it's my favorite submarine of all time. Working on the upholder build for a customer. And actually, I'm going to start out, since we are here anyway, talking about that. This is something that I put together as a rig, and what this allows me to do is cut into the hull. There's a demarcation between the upper hull and the actual pressure hull itself, and so we're going to need to notch this out and make it look like two separate pieces. And so I'm going to use my Dremel, and to get a perfectly straight uniform line, I am going to utilize this technique here. So I built this out of wood. It took about 15 minutes. My Dremel clamps in place there. And the other cool thing about this is you can utilize it if you were to put, say, a pen or a pencil in there to scribe out water lines on your boat. So that's going to be pretty cool. I'm working on the video for this. Part 1 has already been done, where I showed you the watertight cylinder, which is hiding in the back over there. That's an OTW 4.25 inch diameter watertight cylinder. That video is up on YouTube if you want to see how I put that all together and how that works. And then this will be part 2, which is going to be getting the hull prepped. All of these panels need to get cut out, recessed, filled, primed, and all of that stuff. And obviously more work on the big Type 21 as well. I've adhered the top sections together to make large removable panels, and I've got hold down hardware in place for all of those. So that's coming along slowly but surely as well. So how much do you rely on my 3D printer? I would say, I don't want to say quite a bit, but I use it quite often whenever it makes sense. So if I need to quickly fabricate things like bulkheads, brackets, you know, and that kind of thing, I'll leverage my 3D printer because it's much faster to draft it precisely in 3D than it is to fabricate out of plastic and cut it out, because I can draft it very quickly. For example, a bulkhead I could probably draft in 5 minutes, hit print, walk away from it, and then as it prints I can do anything that I want. So I find it a very useful tool in that regard, but I don't rely on it. And hopefully that answers your question. I would say once you have it, you find more and more uses for it. So I love it. I use it all the time. I've got 2. One is a big, as you've seen before, I've got a big commercial printer that'll print large prints. And then I've got a smaller one for more detailed parts, and I've got a really small one coming for really detailed parts, which is a DLP printer and resin. It'll print really highly detailed parts. It'll be perfect for things like periscope tops and that kind of thing. You know, the thing about 3D printing is it allows you to create parts that would otherwise be exceptionally hard to fabricate. And this is, you know, a good example of it. You can see all of the you know, really intricate little openings in there. This would take a long time to fabricate by hand, whereas with the 3D printer it took 15 minutes to print out. And, you know, again, I know a lot of people are lamenting the demise of the you know, real hobbyist who's fabricating from scratch, but you know, it's one of those situations where you get with the times or you're left behind by them. So let's take a look at some batteries. 3 main battery types that are typically used in RC submarines. I got examples of all of them right here. This is a lithium polymer battery. This is sort of the standard battery that lots of people are using nowadays. So LiPo is the abbreviation for it. High energy density, a lot of benefits to it. They don't like water though, and if you do not treat them with respect, they can tend to catch fire rather aggressively. Nickel metal hydride is another common battery type, and typically these are made up of cells, and you can see these are the equivalent of C cells that are all wired together and held in place by this heat shrink material. This particular boat is battery is a 12 volt 5 amp hour battery, which is basically the same thing as this, which is a sealed lead acid battery. So you can see the size differential in there. Again, a higher energy density in the in the nickel metal hydride battery packs. But you need to seal them and keep them out of the water. The thing about these, I lost you guys, and I don't even know where I left off, so I'm going to have to pick up again. Maybe at the nickel metal hydride batteries. Higher energy density than the sealed lead acid batteries. Both of these batteries are the same capacity. 12 volts, 5 amp hour batteries. Again, sealed lead acid batteries can be run in the wet which is an advantage. They're much more robust, easy to charge. These need to be sealed up. Either, I don't know what's going on. It's making me a little aggravated. I apologize for the technical issues that we seem to be having. Maybe it's a talk about batteries. Maybe YouTube doesn't like talking about batteries. But those are the three main types: sealed, lead, acid, nickel, metal hydride, lithium polymer. Again, the most common type, lithium polymer, you need a specialized charger for that. Make sure that you charge them up properly in that case. Got a question in there about, do you make your submarine models like the frame? So you're talking about scratch building. Yeah, obviously I have. I've scratch built quite a few models. What I find now, though, is that most of my builds are of kits. People will say, I want you to build me up this kit of this specific submarine, and I'll just source the kit and I'll construct it for them. A lot of times, depending on the kit, you know, could be a lot of work or it could be very, very easy. So for example, the ARC model Type 7, beautiful kit to put together with very detailed instructions. Everything fits together very, very well. Some of the model kits like you would get from, say for example, like Scale Shipyard, require a lot of skill on behalf of the builder because you need to do a lot of fitting. They don't come with very many parts. You need to scratch build a lot, but you pay a lot less. So you get, you know, what you paid for there. I saw a question in there, what's my usual vocation? I wrote a blog article. If you're ever interested, it's on the website under Bob's blog. It's called All About the RCSubGuy. If you're interested, you can go into all the detail you want about me, but my background is actually in engineering. I never did finish my degree though. Ended up starting my own company with my family that brokers horizontal directional drilling equipment, and that has been going on for like the last like 15 years, 18 years, or something like that. So sales, marketing, general management. I'm now working for a big company that we sold our company to, and I'm doing market and business insights management and innovation management, which is lots of fun, which is why I'm up to date on all the cool new technology that's out there right now. I love that kind of stuff. Hey, let's talk about drainage for RC submarines. And again, as it so happens, I've got an RC submarine hull right here that we can talk about. Oh, look at that, I managed to do it. So, we've now got a view of the submarine that I just finished building. In the bottom there, you can see a series of approximately 5/8 inch diameter holes. Now, there's two things that you need to account for with your hull. You need to have the ability for water to get into the hull, and you need to have the ability for air to get out of the hull. So taking a look at this particular boat, you can see lots of vents all through the upper hull. That allows all of the trapped air to get out. You know, again, you can see that all through this area here. When you're taking a look at your hull, you want to make sure that there are no humped areas that are going to trap air bubbles. The issue with that is that as you dive or surface, those air bubbles can move and they can throw off your trim. So you want to make sure you've got plenty of vents all through the upper section of your hull for air to escape. Don't make the holes too small because the air bubbles need to be of a certain size before they will escape. So you're going to want at least probably 1/8 of an inch of size for your air vents. And then for the water vents, you want to make it so that if you lift that hull out of the water, that it drains, you know, within say 10 or 15 seconds. This is important because as you surface and dive the boat, that water needs to enter and exit the hull. All right, so you want to make sure that you've got adequate flow to allow that water in and out of the boat. So again, that's very, very important that you've got adequate drainage as well as adequate venting for your RC submarine hull. hopefully that answered your question there. Tips for scratch building, beginner and have no 3D printer. The good news is there's a very well established way of constructing a hull, and particularly if you're going to be constructing a modern nuclear submarine that has, you know, a typical cylindrical shape, you know, with a little hat on the top for your sail, and that's called the lost foam method. Google it or check it out on YouTube. Basically what you do is you construct your hull out of high density styrofoam. Easy to work with, easy to cut, easy to sand, easy to shape. All right, get your basic hull form out of there, and you are going to want to coat that likely with epoxy resin and cloth. So that's what you're going to build up to make the actual shell of your submarine. You want to use epoxy because polyester resin and fiberglass cloth, like we usually see, will eat that styrofoam up. It'll melt it, it'll deform, it'll turn into a mess. Epoxy will not do that. A little bit more expensive, but so much easier to work with. It doesn't stink or anything like that. So you encase your foam master with epoxy and cloth in the adequate width, adequate thickness. And then once it's all cured, you can split the hull, you know, with a Dremel or saw, carve out all of the foam. You can dissolve whatever you can't cut out with gasoline or solvent, and you end up with a shell. And then you can sand the exterior smooth, scribe it, add all of your details. It's actually a fairly efficient method for constructing a boat hull. So hopefully that helped you, you know, for your first scratch building exercise. But again, it's called the lost foam method, really common for model airplanes, if you want to take a look at that. Let's see what else we had on that list there. We talked about drainage, we talked about venting, we talked about batteries. Lubricants. I will typically, so on any cylinder, you've got several seals, and in this particular one, this is a 2-inch watertight cylinder. We've got linkage seals here, and then you've got your main drive seal right there. And those are rubber cup seals and O-rings. I use a spray silicone lubricant. WD-40 makes one. This is it right here. Typically you'll use it to lubricate like garage doors and that kind of thing. The silicone won't affect your rubber. So you want to make sure that you're utilizing you know, a rubber safe lubricant. Excuse me. So again, I recommend a silicone lubricant. That particular stuff is almost like a water consistency, exceptionally thin and watery. You can also get silicone grease, and they use it for, let's see here. You get it like this. Comes in like a little container, but it's like a paste. It's harder to work with. And when it gets cold, it gets stiff, and it can actually create, I don't want to say binding, but it can affect the ability for a linkage shaft or a drive shaft to spin. So you certainly don't want that to happen. You want liquid lubricant. Question about a good permit class kit. As it so happens, I am good friends with two exceptionally skilled model builders, and both of them will be very shortly offering permit kits. The first one is Matt Thor of Precision Pattern. His kit is coming out here right away. Matt's actually got an aerospace background, and he's applied all of his knowledge and expertise into the creation of the kits. They're absolutely gorgeous. Epoxy reinforced with carbon fiber. This is like serious hardcore stuff. I got those for sale on my website, permit class kit. Out there if you want to get it. The other gentleman is another good friend of mine, David Merriman. He's in the middle of developing his kit. That will be coming out very shortly as well, and when it does, obviously I'll be carrying that one as well. So you are in luck. We got 2 permit classes that are going to be coming out for you here very shortly. Question, did you buy your kit or build your own subs? If you buy, you should build my own. Well, thank you for your input. Apparently I'm not a real builder unless I scratch build everything. Is that correct? Well, that was a debate on the forums here. You've got kit assemblers and you've got kit builders. As I already mentioned, I've built my own sub hulls before. I do this as a hobby. I do not do this full time. Building your own hull kit is exceptionally labor intensive. If I were to charge out what it would cost me to scratch build a hull for somebody, it would be $10,000. All right. I don't think very many people want to pay 10 grand for an RC sub hull only. So we're at kits. People put that time in and they count on volume to put it through. As you can see, I work out of my garage, and while I do have room, I do not have the facilities to go into production of fiberglass in my own shop. All right, and that's primarily the reason that I don't do that all myself. So hopefully I've explained myself to you. That's all I'm going to talk about it. If you don't think I'm a real builder, that's your opinion. It was nice talking to you. You can hit the exit button, and I won't lose any sleep over it. Gosh, I love people. What else can we talk about? Anybody have any more questions? We touched on basically all of the topics that were emailed to me previously. Let's walk around the shop here. You know, one thing that's really important, access to your model. Now, I know a lot of people, you know, you're working in the basements, you're working in your shops, you don't have a lot of access. One thing as a hint that I will recommend, I find it exceptionally beneficial to have a freestanding workbench in the middle of your work area. And as you can see here, this is the exact same thing. So you get your model in the center and you've got access to the entire perimeter of it for anything that you need to do. That saves you moving it, particularly if you are in a fragile state, if you've got things clamped down. So if possible, try and keep everything freestanding in terms of the workbench so that you can move around the perimeter. You know, there's something else that I can touch on here, and I just so happen to have it all set up on my workbench. I put together a video about linear servos. I love linear servos, and of course the reason is that when you've got a standard servo, you've got an arc. So you've got maximum travel speed at the center of it, and then very limited at the extreme edges. With a linear servo, you've got even amount of travel and speed and torque throughout the entire range. So let's take a look at a few of the different types that we've got out here. Now, I had may put a video together about a servo conversion kit that bolts onto the top of a Futaba servo. Check my YouTube channel for that. The thing I don't like about that, it is exceptionally hard to move in one direction versus another. They look like this. They bolt onto the top of your servo. You have to take your servo apart, exposing all of the gears, and all the gears fall out and all that stuff. I've got a video on it. You can see the arm on here, and you got to kind of push it down, and then it springs back up. You see that? So the servo's got to fight that action in there. So I've actually found this other thing, and it's called a line drive by Sullivan. I managed to get 2. I can't find them anywhere. So if you find a good source for them, let me know, because I want to buy like a bajillion of them. All right, so let me know. Line drive by Sullivan. This is what they look like. So basically what you do is you bolt it, literally, to like the circular servo horn that comes with your servos. And then as that servo spins, you can see that this arm remains linear as it moves forward and back. And the way that it does that is via these really tiny, fine steel cable. And then you've got threaded rods on there. So that's a really slick system for conversion of a standard servo to linear servo. Now, if you've got a little bit more money, I found these linear actuators from a company called Actuonics. Both of these are exceptionally cool, and they've got pretty long throws, and they're pretty small, so they're easy to put into a watertight cylinder. Now, I will say that these are not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. I think the bigger one here was like $80, and the smaller one was like $60. But they're fully proportional, pretty quiet, very powerful, and completely linear. So the reason that I like these is for things like actuating periscopes, for things like actuating bow plane doors, you know, that kind of thing where you want a straight actuation of power going forward and backward, and this moves not very quickly, so it's a nice sedate pace moving forward and back. So again, Actuonics, this is a PQ12-106R, that's the smaller one there, and the other one is an L12-3210-6R if you want more throw. And basically they plug in like any standard servo, and you get completely linear actuation of anything that you need to go. Not waterproof, don't put them in the wet, they got to go in your cylinder or in their own bespoke watertight container, but they will get the job done if you need something moving in and out at a nice pace. That is what I've got. I'm at 28.5 minutes. That's pretty darn good for my estimate there of half an hour. I'll give you guys like 30 seconds more to throw any questions that you have out. And then after that, I will sign off and let you go about your business. In the meantime, here you can see sealed lead acid battery, like I said, tucked in the bow of my X-Craft. Just sits in a little cradle in there. I waterproofed the connections with some RTV, a waterproof connector in there that I talked about previously. Just slips right in there, just like that. These are some clamp hold downs that I made for the watertight cylinder. Drops in there, you drop these down, bolt them in, again, on the 3D printer. Best 3D printer to start with. Oh my gosh, there are so many out there right now. You know, to get started, give yourself a budget of $500. Go on Amazon, check out the reviews. I haven't even been up to date on the new printers that are out there right now. There are so many of them coming out, and they've all got, you know, different features and everything. I love, I should say, the MakerBot printers, but they're expensive. But I've had my old MakerBot 2 for Replicator 2 for like 6 years, never had a problem, and I must have thousands of hours on it. So that's like a couple grand if you were to go with something like that. Don't go with the Gen 5, go with something different. I've had a Lulzbot printer, the Taz 5. That's a really good printer as well. Again, a little bit on the pricey side, but check it out. Lots out there for $500 or under. That'll get you started. For the kinds of things that we're doing here, for printing out bulkheads and that kind of stuff, it's perfect. It'll be perfectly fine. All right, guys, I'm going to let you go. As always, if you have any suggestions or desires for topics to talk about, hit me up. and I will do my best to answer your questions. In the meantime, you can hit me up at any time, Bob at RC-Sub.com, sales at nautilusdrydocks.com, and my website is, as you know, nautilusdrydocks.com. Thanks for joining me, guys, and we will catch you all next time.